So, for a lot of you, nice to see you after a long time. Aditya, Harjas, Lakshya, Mansi, a lot of you we've met earlier. I mean, we've interacted earlier in our earlier sessions. Hi, Tushar. So, firstly, all the best to all of you for next week. And with 7, 8 days to go, it's really, now close to D-Day. So we need to get started, in terms of figuring out what do we do next, how do we prepare over these 7 days, what are the things that we keep in mind, and then go in for CAT in the best frame of mind with the best state of preparedness. That would ensure that we give our peak performance. Now, what that peak performance is decided on that day. So, the way I'll conduct this session essentially is that this will not really be a very technical session. We'll not solve too many questions. For that matter, we'll not really solve a question at all. It will be more an a chat with you guys where I'll try and understand your concerns, your areas where you feel you are struggling. So you can look at it like a one-to-many mentoring session where I am available for you over the next hour or so. You can ask as many questions as you want, and as you know, whatever questions are left behind, please feel free to ping me or ping Pradeep, and one of us will get back to you. So yeah, let's get started with some of the questions. Till that time, I'll share my screen and I'll tell you my agenda for discussion for today. So yeah, so as you know, like every time, you can type in your questions and we will have a quick discussion on all of them. Some key points that I will be covering today are: one will be mocks. So how many mocks to attempt, how to attempt them, what should be my strategy, etc. The second will be practice. Third, which will be a part of practice, is learning. Then I have mindset. And one of the most important aspects of last week preparation is what I would call documents and peripherals, which I'll come to last. So yeah, I have a question coming in. So for the first 2 3 minutes, okay, Somesh, what can be an ideal score in each section for a 99 score? Okay, so Somesh, and for the benefit of a lot of you who have joined possibly for the first time, there's one more question that's come in. What's the good score in CAT comparing test funda mock scores? Okay, so Gaurav and Somesh, what I'll do is I'll give you a table here, and you can refer to this table. Just a second. Yeah, so you can refer to this table and then map all your scores accordingly. So what we've done, and I've shared this table with people earlier as well. What we've done here, just a second, is, let's say I consider 4 or 5 benchmarks. So I have a 90, I have a 95. Let's say I consider an intermediate range, which would be 97.5 to 98. Then I have a 99, and then I have a 99.5 or so. You possibly want to go slightly lower, you have an 85. Now, obviously, we would ideally not want to go in the first two ranges here right now. But even if I start with this as my benchmark, then I would say that anywhere between, say, 33 to 35% of my scores in around each section should be good enough to give me a 90 percentile. So what we do is we do a percentage to percentile comparison. So for example, Gaurav, if you are looking at say test funda mocks as well, let's just take a case where you have a 72 question mock, then that translates to 216 questions. Now, when I consider 216 marks, so if I consider one third of that, that would roughly be the 72 to 75 marks overall. So I know that if I'm reaching this kind of a range, then I am crossing the 90 percentile. In test funda, what might happen is that because we have a smaller base compared to, say, a lot of bigger players like IMS or Time or CL, obviously the number of students would be fewer. But if you look at this comparison, you get a better idea. Secondly, you need to keep in mind that our mocks are slightly tougher, especially when I consider the verbal ability and DILR sections. So you can scale up your marks slightly. So as I said, if I consider 72 to 75, now if I were to broadly distribute it equally, then I know that in verbal, I would need to look somewhere between 25 to 27. Here, this would be possibly in the 20 to 22 range. And here, this would again possibly be around the 26 to 28 range. And this way, you can do it for every, say, category. So here, the overall mapping, what we've seen over the years is roughly at 55%. So when I consider 55% of 216, then what I'm looking at is a score somewhere around 115. Just a second, I'll just check that so that I don't end up giving you. Yeah. So when I look at this score, it would be somewhere between 115 to 120 in a test of 216. If this number goes down to say 198, which is a 66 question test, then obviously this will also fall accordingly. This will possibly fall to 105 or so. Now, when I look at this here, let's say I divide it equally, then this possibly would have to go to around 36, 37. This may have to go to say 30, 32. And this may have to be again at say 37, 38 or so, roughly. That would give you the kind of marks that you're looking for. So right now, if you want to keep a benchmark, I would say your benchmark here would be something like this: 33 to 35%, 40 to 42%. I would say here this would be 45, anywhere between 45 to 48%, or maybe 50% can be considered a benchmark. So you can say that if you're crossing this 50% mark, then you are starting to cross 98. If you want to cross this, then you would have to definitely go above the 60s. So if you are beyond this, then anyways, you are in a relatively safe space. So that is how I would look at the overall performance if I want to measure it right now. Yeah. So I hope Somesh and Gaurav, it answers your question for now. Okay. Before before I answer Tushar's question, I'm worried about DILR. So Tushar, I will come to that. There's one more aspect that I want to discuss here. Now, when I consider, let's say, a 99 percentile, if I look at this, then at this stage, and I have discussed this earlier when I did the session on 2 months to CAT, I had said that this should tell you how your attempts need to be structured. If I want, for example, 36 marks in verbal, and I know that let's say if I consider the three sections here, and I know that my average accuracy in verbal is only say around the 70% mark, whereas in DILR my attempts are less, my accuracy is say 85. In quant again, my accuracy is 85 or so, then your attempt should accordingly be changed here. What do I mean by this? I know that purely as a linear equation, I know that if I want to get 36 marks here and I have an accuracy of around 70, then I will need to have roughly 16 to 17 attempts, whereby I will even start reaching this value at a bare minimum, and this will need to go up slightly. On the other hand, if I have an 85 to 90% accuracy here, then I know that, okay, even if I do 3 sets well, that's 12 questions, I get 2 wrong, then I still am at around 28 or 29 marks. So that is the kind of calculation that you need to do. Now, I will not give you exact numbers because those numbers vary to a large extent from student to student. So ideally, I can tell you an ideal scenario that yes, you should have 85% accuracy or 80+% accuracy. Of course, that is desirable. That is like a body mass index, that at a certain height, you are expected to have a certain weight. But let's say you are underweight or you are overweight, then you move towards going into the correct BMI range. Then the ideal BMI value doesn't really apply to you. You have to look at your body or your uh, parameters and work accordingly. So one of the things under mindset that I would like to tell you is, firstly, please do not compare. And over the next 7 days, for me, this would be one of the key things that you would need to ensure that you do not ruin your chances of taking CAT well. Because it's a very, and I am digressing a bit here. Tushar, I will come to your question. I'm digressing a bit here. This is one of the biggest challenges that students face at this time, that I am studying in this group or I am part of this WhatsApp or Telegram group. Most people there are getting 98.2, or most people are getting 19 attempts in verbal. I am still stuck at 15. If you are stuck at 15 right now, then you are not suddenly going to reach 19 in 7 days. Yes, it is easy to reach those 19 attempts if you just tick mark 4 answers. But if that is going to drop your scores further, then it's no use. What you should try and figure out is, if I am at 15 attempts, what is my accuracy? Is it 10? Is it 12? Is it 14? If it is 10, how do I incrementally go up to 12? If it is 12, is there a way I can go up to 13 or 14? So look at where you can get better. So for the next 7 days, if I were to look at areas of practice, that is something, and that is straight away emerging out of here. What should be the areas that require attention? And I will give you an example for this in a short while. So if, let's say, if I look at Tushar's question here, Tushar says that I am, being inconsistent in a way at DILR. So sometimes it's good, sometimes we tend to screw it up. Tushar, this is a very common problem. That is because, please understand that in the DILR section, the choices that you have in front of you are very limited. See, in quant, it's like a simple permutations and combinations question. In quant, what happens is that you have anywhere between 20 to 25 questions to choose from, which means that if you are targeting, say, 17 to 18 attempts, then you know that, let's say, you didn't do well in a strength area, for example, arithmetic. Then you know that if you are reasonably good at the other areas, you can try something in geometry. What happens in a DILR set is that, because you have only 5 or 6 sets and you feel you're good at, say, tournaments, and a tournament based question does not turn out to be good in the exam, then you suddenly start realizing that, look, this is one attempt gone. So now I have 2 out of 4. I'm running out of chances. So there you have to be, you have to be very careful, and you need presence of mind. In CAT, what happens is, out of the 5 sets typically that you will have, you'll end up having anywhere around 2 sets that are definitely doable. And this is something I've observed over the years. So if I were to consider the overall DILR structure, I would say that anywhere around, say, 2 sets would be generally easy to moderate. Now, how easy and how moderate is something that nobody can predict. Like last year, the two DI sets were absolute sitters. The year before that, there was one set on placing people on levels. That was a sitter. But did you have the presence of mind to hunt it down or search for it? There might be two sets, anywhere around 1 to 2 sets, that could go under moderate to tough, more towards moderate. So these generally depend on your strengths, maybe Venn diagrams, network diagrams, etc. And one typically tends to be on the tough side. So for me, and even if I am taking it next Sunday as a student, for me, the challenge would be to first find these two sets. If I am able to touch these two sets and tackle them in anywhere around, say, 20 to 24 minutes, roughly 10 to 12 minutes per set, then I know that I am in a reasonably good space, because that leaves me approximately 15 minutes to target one set. The minute I have crossed three sets, I know I'm in a very, very safe space. So, of course, that would depend. I'm not saying this as a, as a number that needs to be adhered to strictly, but this is a ballpark figure. So if we know that if we have crossed these three sets, then more or less in 99% of the cases, we would have cleared the cutoff and we would start moving towards maximizing our score. So Tushar, one thing, you still have 7 days. So if you have any imminent weakness, if you feel that I am still struggling with a certain question type, for example, let's say instance-based Venn diagrams or network diagrams, or let's say tournaments, then yes, you may be better off trying out at least 4 to 5 sets or 10 sets of that type, so that at least you have an idea of how to structure it. If you have multiple gaps on your portfolio, then it's a problem. So, if, and today in this session, I will give you a lot of IPL analogies. For example, if I consider Mumbai Indians this year, everybody knew that they have an awesome batting lineup, a great fast bowling lineup. The only potential weakness that they had was the spinners. So the way they tackled this was where they, minimized the damage that could be done to them and saw how they could at least ensure that they cleared the bare minimum level for spinners by taking two spinners. Whereas if you look at a team like, say, Chennai Super Kings, they ended up having multiple holes. Old batsmen, less agile players, spinners out of form, etc., etc. So when multiple holes start appearing, then you don't know where to plug them. And that is where your vulnerability increases. So for all of you, I would say that at this stage, you need to be very, very sure as to what your strong areas are within each section and what are your vulnerabilities. Right now, that would be the key part for me. If you have multiple vulnerabilities, then that will decide what you do here over the next 1 week. So there is no real formula to say that, okay, in the next 7 days, do 100 questions of maths, 20 sets of DI. No, if you are damn good at maths, then doing 100 questions or 200 questions of maths is not really benefiting you. But if you are struggling at, say, para jumbles, then do para jumbles. Speak to a faculty, try and understand. Maybe, go to 5 videos on YouTube, try and understand how it is to be solved. But try and ensure that you have a bare minimum level of competence in that question type. I generally have a very, very firm mantra on this. I tell people that this is not a syllabus. You are not allowed to leave chapters. So even if you feel that you are weak at certain chapters, you need to have a bare bones basic understanding of that chapter. You don't understand quadratic equations, fine. But you should at least know what sum of roots, product of roots, discriminant, etc. are. So that if you end up with a sitter in the exam, you are not repenting, saying that, oh, what if I had studied this earlier? So Tushar, don't really worry because of the inconsistency. It happens to the best of people. Also depends on the kind of questions that have been asked. I would say try and focus on the two sets which would generally be attemptable and try and see how you can maximize your attempts there. Once you do that, then your work will become easier. One of the other things that I have mentioned in my video solutions from time to time is the fact that often there are two sets that we do well. The remaining three sets also have one or two questions that can be answered pretty easily. So you may not need to solve the whole table or create the whole tournament structure or whatever. There might be one or two tables that are direct entries. So you need to figure out how that is done. If you do not do that, then yes, you might get stuck at 8 or 9 attempts. So hope this answers your question, Tushar. I'll move on to the next few questions. Just a second. Yeah. Uh, okay. First, I'll answer Harjas and Rishav. So, Harjas says a score of 48% marks in CAT will map to what percent score in actual CAT. So, Harjas, firstly, we can't really map it to a score in CAT or a percentage score, because if we are looking at ICAT percentage, then I would give or take 5% here and there, which means that I would be looking at a 50 or a 47 or so, depending on how you do on that day. But there is a huge variable here, and that variable is the fact that how many TITA questions have you answered. Because if your TITA attempts are wrong, you're not losing marks. Whereas if your MCQs are wrong, you start losing marks. So I would say that if you are at 48 in ICATs, it would possibly around the 50, 51 mark in the actual CAT. It would be around the 50, 51 mark in the actual CAT. So that should be a reasonably good performance. I have given you a benchmark which you can try to reach, which is 55%. But again, to use a cricketing analogy, if you feel that you are able to reach a 170, do not unduly try to reach a 200. There are games where people say that, oh, this looks like a belter of a pitch, so I need to score 200 or 220. And in trying to do that, they end up getting all out for, say, 120, which is far less than what they would have normally got. So keep that balance in mind. Coming to Rishav's question here, I have given 11 marks of test funda. My average percentile is 80 to 83. Where can I hope to lie in the actual CAT paper? So, Rishav, if you are at 80 to 83 right now, I would need to know your average percentage, but I would suggest that at the bare minimum, need to start targeting, or you need to target at least this range with balanced scores. Why do I say so, Rishav? Because even if you have a 90 plus percentile in all three sections and the scores are balanced, then you do have chances of getting calls from some of the second or second rank colleges, that I would say. Definitely not the IIMs here, but a lot of other decent colleges which do give calls at a low 90 percentile. However, one of the key things that all of you need to remember is, please ensure that there's a minimum cutoff that has been crossed in all the sections. So there's no point having a 99 percentile in DILR and Quant and a 50 or 70 percentile in verbal. Then that's absolutely meaningless. That is a great performance for a Quant faculty. So if Pradeep has that would be brilliant for Pradeep. It's no use for you guys. So that is something you will need to keep in mind. Yeah. Couple of questions have come here. So Shivam, how much boom can we expect when compared to test funda mocks in actual CAT? Shivam, as I've said, in multiple fora, our mocks are possibly around 10% tougher. So if you go with the same performance, then 10 to 15% increase. But then, with the number of variables involved here, same difficulty level, same level of performance in the exam, etc., I would say that at a bare minimum, expect that you will be there itself. So you would need to try and figure out, how do I go 5 percentage points higher? And considering the your quant skills that I've seen in the group, I would say that definitely there is a lot of potential where you can at least raise your marks by 10-12% based in, based on your attempts in the exam. Yeah, coming to Gaurav and Shikha. Okay. So Gaurav says, while solving the mocks, I think I'm doing good, but when I see the reports, I realize I've done many silly mistakes. So this drops my score from 60 to 50, 52. How do I avoid the silly mistakes? Okay. So Gaurav, here the key challenge is to look at two, three things here. First, identify where do those silly mistakes happen in the exam. So there are two, three areas. One place is you don't read the question properly. Now, what do I mean by this? Yesterday, I was doing a video solution on one of the quant questions, and there was a lot of calculation to be done, a lot of values to be found, and we found the radius. Now, it was a theta question, so there was a huge possibility that students would have marked the radius, which was, I think, some 5 centimeters, as the answer. Because we are programmed since childhood, since our school days, that once you take x, the value of x is your answer. So we end up, once we find x, we end up marking that as the answer. So in a lot of cases, we don't read the question properly. What does the question actually want from us? So you don't read the question, that's one area. Second is where if there are unit-based questions, this generally applies to two very, very important chapters. One is time, speed, and distance. The other is, I would say, the whole area of geometry. When we consider these, there is often a conversion between the units which we ignore. And sometimes when, the examiner will set your options in such a way that if you, let's say, do not consider the right unit, you will get the answer as 100, whereas it should be 10, and both will be part of the options. Or there might be a none of these, and you end up going wrong. So units is something that you need to consider right up front. One of the other key things is, as I said, reading the question correctly. When it comes to DILR, have you read the graph properly? Now, this is one of the key parts in the question. When I say graph, I would also include my caselets here. Why do I say so? Let's say I have a question where I have given that these 20 fruits are to be distributed amongst eight people, and there are all these various conditions. Sometimes there might just be one clue that not more than three people got even number of fruits, and it's a very small clue, we end up missing it. Or we might say not more than three people got more than three fruits. Now what would that mean? That there was a maximum three people who got anywhere between 1 to 3 fruits. So how you read that statement, whether you interpret it correctly, these are small nuances that decide whether you're answering the question correctly or not. So that's another area where you need to be careful. Then, as I said, uh, nuances of the questions, I'll just think of anything else that comes to my mind. Yeah, the fourth and very, very important is the use of shortcuts. Now, call me old school, call me, a fossil, but I myself give you shortcuts during the video solutions. But for me, what is very important in the shortcuts is where do they apply and where do they not apply. That is something that you need to know very, very clearly. For example, when we consider our most famous formula, arithmetic mean greater than equal to geometric mean, etc., I need to know that they apply only to positive numbers. Now, if my value cannot be positive, then I cannot apply that. Or when I consider log, let's say today itself I was dealing with a question. Let's say I have a log and my denominator here is, or my base here is 2x minus 3, and this is something else, some value. And I want to look at the values of x. in the options. Now, when I want to use shortcuts here, then I need to know that, okay, what values can my base take? So my base can either be greater than 1, in which case my x has to be greater than 3 by 2, or my base can be between 0 to 1. So in which case my x will take a different set of values. So suppose I have x equal to 1 here as one of the options. Then I would use a shortcut and say, okay, let me see if I can eliminate this. So there, if I substitute, I get base as -1, which is not valid. So I know I can eliminate this. So when you are using shortcuts, you need to know the rules of the concepts here. For example, a very common silly mistake that I have seen people do. Suppose I ask you this question, how many triangles can I form with integral sides or whose sides are 3, 5, and 10? How many such triangles can I form? Come on, it's a 2-second question. I want an answer to this. Or if I ask you what would be the area, if I ask you now, if I ask you that how many triangles, you at least know that, okay, I need to work on this approach. But let's say I ask you, what would be the radius or the in radius of this triangle? Then what happens is a lot of people directly start jumping to r equal to area upon semi perimeter and start putting in all the values. But before you jump to this, you need to realize that in a triangle, there is a rule that needs to be satisfied, that a plus b is greater than c. Did you check this? Did you realize that, okay, this is not possible? So when you are doing all this, have a look at the options. If I give you values like these, then I might have to put an option saying no such triangle exists or data inconsistent. And that might give you a hint as to how to solve this. So when Gaurav, when you talk about silly mistakes, these are some common silly mistakes that happen. Again, in calculations, one of the areas where we tend to go wrong. When I look at calculations, we tend to do a lot of quick calculations, and that's good. But if you have a calculator, why not use it? I have myself, and some of you may have seen that in the video solutions as well. I have myself made silly calculation errors, which I have had to cancel out and write again. All of us are human, but if it happens there, you've solved a question damn well, and you make a silly error, say 32% of 550, and you make a very silly error. Then you'll try outside, but it will not be of any use. So use the calci. If you need to spend 10 seconds extra, but it's giving you those 3 marks, then I would always do a trade-off between 3 marks versus 10 seconds. If you are sure about it. Yep. So coming to the next few questions here, Shikha, how to judge which questions to reject in verbal? Okay. Laksh says how to can I get from 80 to 95? I'm weak at DI and LR. DI and LR suggest how to improve. If we get 100 questions, okay, fine. So I'll answer all these questions one by one. Shikha says how to judge which questions to reject in verbal. So Shikha, verbal is a very, very subjective thing, especially because it depends on the subject matter that you have been given. So for example, when I look at passages, I generally have 3 parameters on which I evaluate a passage. One is subject matter, which is what is the area that is being discussed. One is the type of questions, and one is the length. Now, so there's no clear-cut algorithm, and as some of you in the Telegram groups would have read, Vishnu sir also mentioned it today, that there's no fixed formula for this. So, sometimes you have to go by instinct. When you read a passage, when you read the questions, the purpose of solving so many mocks over the last 6-7 months is to develop that instinct or that gut feel that no, I can tackle this. There will be always close options, but each of those options will have certain keywords that will help you eliminate them. So, Shikha, for each of you and for me as well, there will be different question types that are worth leaving. So, for instance, I am good at para summary because I have the crutch of options. So, I typically would not leave them unless I don't understand the passage. If I understand the passage, then I will definitely attempt it. So, that's my algorithm. When it comes to para jumbles, I am damn good at explaining them, but I sometimes go wrong in solving it. So, in such a scenario, I would attempt it only if I'm comfortable that, okay, out of the 4 statements or 5 statements, I am confident with 3 or 4. So let me try and create a passage out of it. In RCs, if I am comfortable reading the RC, then I'm pretty sure that my critical reasoning skills will allow me to answer the questions. So you need to do that self-evaluation, have a plan A in place that out of the 5 hours, sorry, not 5, out of the 3 or 4 RCs that I get, I will first tackle 2 or 3, and then among the 3 non-RC question types, these are the ones that I'll try to prefer. Of course, there has to be a plan B, plan C based on what appears, but this has to be a basic plan. Okay. Coming to Lakshya's question, can I get from 80 percentile to 95 percentile in 7 days? Lakshya, I don't want to sound like a salesman, but why not? If I look at 80 percentile as say 28% or even say 25% marks, then 25% of 216 would correspond roughly to 1/4, which is basically 54 marks. And if I consider 5% 40% marks, then this 40% would correspond roughly to 85 marks. Now, if I need to go from year to year, then you need 30 marks more. And if I need 30 marks more, the way to break this up is I need 10 marks in each section, which essentially means another 3 to 4 attempts. So you need to ask yourself that if I want to jump to 95, 3 to 4 attempts would mean, like you have all those ads coming up during Diwali. कि fit होने के लिए 1 किलोमीटर ज्यादा, 1 फ्लोर ज्यादा चढ़ लो, 10 skipping ज्यादा कर लो, etc. All these fancy ads that Hindustan Unilever will come out with. Similarly, here you need to ask yourself, can I attempt 1 RC extra? Am I good enough to attempt, or can I reach out to attempt one more DILR set? Can I increase my quant by 2 or 3 attempts? So if you break it up this way, then yes, you can improve. But if you think that 55 to 85 is a huge jump, then yes, it is a huge jump. How do you break it up is up to you. So that is something you'll need to keep in mind. Yeah. Now I'll answer Prakhar and Abhinav's question together. Coming to Tanya's question first, which is if we get 100 questions in the exam, what should be our strategy? Okay, Tanya, if we do get 100 questions in the exam, then we will be taking XAT and not CAT. Because then the entire strategy will simply boil down to question selection. Simply understand this, that if we have 100 questions, then most probably we will be looking at a 34, 32, 34 structure. Now, if I consider, just assume quant. 34 questions in quant means 34 individual problems. If you divide 40 minutes by 34, you end up getting literally 1.2 minutes. That's 1 minute and some 12 seconds. Now, what will you read? What will you understand? And what will you solve? So what will happen in that case is that your cutoffs will really dip. In that kind of scenario, what I would try and do, and see, if I have 34 questions, now just think about it. It's not in CAT's interest itself to ask you 100 questions in such a short time frame. Why do I say so? If you have 34 questions in quant, then to make the paper balanced, you will need to, or the CAT authorities will need to put anywhere between 11 to 12 questions that are easy or sitters. I know that as a student, I will be able to attempt approximately 17, 18 questions, at the most 20 questions in these 40 minutes. Now, if I'm able to find 11 to 12 sitters, CAT has made my life very easy, because even at the rate of 2 minutes per question, I am done with 11 questions in 20 minutes or 22 minutes. So I have 18 minutes or so to tackle the level 2 or the moderately tough questions. And in 18 minutes in CAT, very high chances I'll be able to do another 7 to 8 questions or 6 questions at least. So I've crossed 18 attempts. So, either the difficulty level would have to go down drastically, or the cutoffs would have to go down drastically. So this does not seem to be the, like, I don't see a likelihood of this. If we do get something like this, then I would say that you try and ensure that in 40 minutes you attempt at least say 17, 18 questions in quant. So you try and think of it just this way, that how many could I have attempted in a normal 40-minute test? That is what I try, because the cutoffs will fall down. So it becomes like IFT or ZAT, where you have very low sectional cutoffs, which is generally never the CAT strategy. Coming to Abhinav and Prakhar's question here, which are more or less similar. I am weak at DI and LR, how to improve? And Prakhar also has a similar question, that VA and DLR have been very inconsistent. Okay. And Prakhar has a very pertinent point, that sometimes a mock comes where scores go down. So I will use Prakhar's question to discuss one area which was related to mocks here, which I anyways wanted to discuss after the Q&A. So Aditya, also same question. Will you recommend taking new mocks? Aditya, sorry, actually I missed this same question in the chat as well. My bad there. What else? How many mocks should I give? Okay. Could you guide the ideal way to analyze your mocks? What percentage of marks per section is cut off? Okay. How many questions from modern math and algebra can be expected? Okay. So first I'll come to the key question that all of you are asking, which is about mocks. So let me just erase some part of this. So when how many mocks do you guys intend to take? And should you take mocks at all? Or should you just practice? These are all standard questions that I face. And I would say that you should definitely take a few mocks, but don't take or don't make it the only aspect of your preparation right now. So before you sit down to take a mock, you need to figure out the one question that I had asked you earlier. How many gaps or holes do you have in your overall portfolio? So if you feel that you are very weak at a certain area, then your first priority should be to practice those areas and keep your number of mocks at an optimal level. So suppose I have 7 days and maybe I'm going to study for say 10 hours now, then those 70 hours, I mean 10 hours every day. So of course, let's ignore next Saturday. So from Sunday to Friday would be 6 days. Then if you feel that taking mocks will not hamper your preparation, then I would take a mock every day, once a day. If I feel that it might affect my confidence, then I might take it at alternate days or on alternate days. But generally, I would say anywhere between 3 to 6 mocks is what you can target now. How should I take a mock? That is the more important question. And this will also relate to a question that some of you have asked, that I'm having a lot of variation in my scores. See, the problem with taking too many mocks at this stage is that if I have, let's say, I'm getting a consistent score, or like Tushar had said, I'm being inconsistent in DILR. And in 2 consecutive mocks, I end up getting just 1 attempt or 2 attempts in DILR, then my confidence has entirely gone for a toss. If that is happening, then I might be better off not practicing too many mocks. Whereas if I feel that overall my scores have stabilized, and I want to simulate the exam scenario, then yes, I may be better off taking a mock every day. So this decision, whether I go for an everyday mock or an alternate day mock, is something you will need to figure out based on where you feel you are in your preparation, or in not preparation really, but in terms of your mindset. If you ask me, I would say I might try to take 6 mocks simply to keep myself fresh and ensure that my body gets adjusted to sitting at one place for 2 hours. I have mentioned this in my earlier sessions as well. I used to do that not really as a CAT student because I was working at that time and nobody guided us. But when I was in my 10th and 12th standards, at that time it was very fashionable to practice past year papers and practice all these mocks. So I used to always practice them at a certain time, sit for that entire duration, take XYZ number of foolscap sheets and practice it or solve it properly as if I was sitting for the entire exam. So you need to keep that kind of a thought process within you and accordingly solve it. Now, coming to what should be my mindset when I'm taking the mock, what is the purpose of the mock right now? The purpose of the mock right now is simply to understand whether whatever strategy I have decided is working for me or not. Again, let's say if I were to take a cricketing analogy, let's say if you look at say a Mumbai Indians again, you would see in the 2013, 14, 15 era, they used to be famous for losing their first 5, 6 games and they used to make a comeback after that. The big reason for that was that in the first 5, 6 games, their team was not stable. They would keep experimenting with combinations. And then, especially their opening was not stable. So they would keep losing matches. Till the time they realized what their best combination was, half the season would be gone. Then they had to come back from behind, which is exactly the same thing you would have seen with, say, a team like, say, a Sunrisers Hyderabad in this season. So that is the exact analogy which applies to you as well. Are you sure of what you want to do in each section? So for example, are you sure of your approach? In verbal, suppose you say that in the first 20 minutes, I am going to try and attempt 2 RCs. Then in the next 10 to 12 minutes, I'm going to attempt the non-RCs. The last 8 to 10 minutes, I'll attempt one more RC. That's my strategy. Now that is giving me inconsistent marks, but overall I am adjusted to it. So then when I take the mock, my purpose would not be to try out a new strategy. कि चलो इस बार सारे आरसी पहले करते हैं फिर नॉन आरसी करते हैं या इस बार नॉन आरसी से शुरू करते हैं. Now is not the time to do radical experiments because that will only hamper your confidence and that will not give you enough data sets to decide whether that model is working for you or not. So if you are sure that your model that you have decided is working for you, then you try and see how it can be made better. That if you are attempting 2 RCs, how do you ensure that the first 2 RCs that you select are the best for you, not necessarily the simplest, the best for you. So the next 6 days then have to be focused on that. So there again, you have to take a decision that look, my DILR and verbal or my quant and verbal seem to be stuck or seem to be fine so far. I am really struggling in DILR. So how do I master DILR? Then I would not take a mock. It's okay. Then you can go and take 5 DILR sectionals. Or I would go back to the last 5 mocks that I took or the worst 5 mocks that I took and see where my attempt strategy failed. Because as I said, every mock will have at least 2 doable questions. And it's not just in TF mocks, you go to any institute. That will be the general trend. So then you go to the performance analytics of that institute's mocks and you ask yourself, okay, which were the 2 easiest questions? Why didn't I attempt these? Why did I attempt those 2? Then try out a sectional, see if it is working for you. So what you do in these next 7 days will depend to a large extent based on your self-evaluation and do it on a section to section basis. So you decide actionables. What I would do, one of the things you can try out is create a mental grid for yourself. Let's say you divide it into three sections, VA, DILR, and QA, and create a checklist. So one could be, let's say, concepts. And if there is any glaring weakness here, so you ask yourself, okay, VA concepts fairly strong, DILR concepts fairly strong, Quant excellent, fine. So I don't need to touch this too much, fine. What is the second area? It is question selection. So in VA, I am average here. In DILR, I am pathetic, whatever. You could give numbers. I mean, you could give rankings to it. You could give a rating, whatever you want to do. But this gets marked as a red flag that here I am struggling with question selection. Okay, quant, good. Accuracy, let's say verbal, pathetic, DILR, excellent, quant, average. Then based on these kind of things, you need to start identifying what can be called actionables. What would be my actionable if here I know that my question selection is decent and my accuracy is pathetic? Then the clear actionable would be identify the question types, because accuracy is never uniformly pathetic. And I'm sorry to use that word, but it's never uniformly bad or terrible or pathetic. It is always for certain question types. You will always observe that whenever I get a question type which says the author agrees with all of the following except, I end up going wrong. The key point that the author is trying to make, I end up going wrong. So you should know by now that these are the three question types where I am going wrong all the time. Then identify that and work on this. Whereas, so for this, if I have to work, I may have to go to either sectionals or I may have to go back right here and say that if I'm struggling at this question type, I go to my faculty and ask him, how do I solve this? How do I master this? Whereas in DILR, suppose you identify that, okay, my selection is pathetic, my accuracy is excellent, which means whatever I select, I do it damn well. Then why is my selection pathetic? So go back to the analytics here and go to the questions and ask yourself, what was the decision making factor that made you reject this question versus select the other question? Or when you selected it, where did you get stuck? So if you ask me, if you go back to your last 7, 8, 10 mocks, even if you analyze them well, there is a very high chance of improving your scores very clearly by at least 10 marks, simply because you know where you're going wrong. These are like the technical adjustments that a batsman or bowler would do after a bad test match, where he goes and sees videos. So if I go back to a very famous example, a Sachin Tendulkar keeps getting out driving the ball in Australia, and then he decides this is what I'm doing wrong. So I am not going to do this. I'm going to go to plan B and change my game completely. I'll open up the other side of the ground and I hit a 241 or a 248. So how does that happen? That happens through analytics. So here you do that. But again, this will be dependent on each section. In quant, if you see this is good and average, then if you are at average, how do I go up marginally, at least by 10% here? And in doing that, does my accuracy suffer? So here I have taken one example. It's not that it will always be the same table for all of you, but you can define 3-4 concepts like these or 3-4 parameters like these and measure yourself. Based on that measurement, you need to identify an actionable for each section. Once you've identified that actionable, then you will be able to decide, do I take a mock? Do I take a sectional? So for example, for maybe, verbal here, based on what I've said, taking a mock might be important. For DILR, maybe one or two sectionals followed by a mock may be important. For quant, taking a mock would be very important because it's the last section. So there's a psychological aspect where you're tired. So that is how I create a thought process behind my work. I hope that answers the question that a lot of you had here. Aditya, Prakhar, I hope this answers your question. In case it doesn't, feel free to, answer it. Tanya, your question would be a follow-up to what I just answered, where I said that how do I go from 30 to 45%? Yeah, Abhinav, you've raised your hand. Please feel free to type and let me know. So Tanya, again, if you want to go from 30% to say a 45 to 50%, that's a 20% increase. So a 40 mark increase, then you need at least those 10 to 12 marks per section. So based on the analysis that I just gave you, you need to figure out where you are going to get those marks from. Okay. Yeah. A couple of questions here. Then there's an anonymous attendee. So I'll come back to that. Akshat has a question, still 35 to 33 to 35% to 90 percentile, or the percentage will increase. So Akshat, see, this is based on historical data. So as such, it can never be a prediction. Okay. Shivam, okay, screen is not cleared. Maybe there's some issue here. So is this visible? The grid that I just made, VA, DILR, QA, is this visible to you guys? Yeah, okay. So, sorry, I'll just, I missed out on that question. So just give me a second. Yeah. So answering Akshat's questions, will the percentage increase? Well, Akshat, if the paper turns out to be simpler, then obviously it will increase. If the paper turns out to be tougher than expected, then it might go down a bit. This is generally what we call a ballpark figure, some kind of figure, to give you a benchmark, to give you a range that, look, if you do this, then you are liable or likely to get these kind of marks. There's never a guarantee to this. So we need to keep this in mind. I generally always say that whenever I have a benchmark, I would always top up the benchmark by a couple of marks everywhere, or 3 to 4 marks everywhere, and aim for that. Knowing my technique that if I aim for 40, I will end up coming to 37. So I then deliberately aim for 40. That's my strategy. There's an earlier question that I had missed here. Yeah, so I've answered how many mocks should I give, Rishabh. Then how many questions from modern maths and algebra can we expect? So generally, in a 34 question test, what I had seen was, and here see, this is a slightly dicey area because the classification of arithmetic and modern math varies, arithmetic, algebra, and modern math varies from institute to institute. So for example, in our courseware, we put numbers also under the overall algebra family, and we put logs and surds also under algebra. And modern maths comprises PNC, probability, functions, set theory, sequences, and series. So if I take that into account, what I used to observe is that anywhere around 1/3, 12 to 11 to 12 questions, around 12 were from say arithmetic. There used to be anywhere around 7 to 8 questions at a bare minimum from algebra. Say another 6 to 7, or maybe another 7 to 8 from say geometry, and the rest. So this is coming out to be a more equal distribution. I think this used to go to 9, 10 also, but modern math used to be the lowest. So if I say this would be somewhere around 6 questions, this was the broad breakup that I remember. Now, if I take this to 24, or if I take a 2/3, say 23 roughly, then I would expect anywhere around 8, 6, 5, and 4, which would be 14 and 9, 23. Now, I'm not saying that these are the numbers that we expect. Secondly, what happens is that there are a lot of questions in quant that can't really be attributed to one area. So I can create a question on functions, which is also based on logarithms. Now, where do I put that? I could classify it as algebra or modern math, or I could put a question on functions, which is based on a revenue, profit, and cost function. So does that go under profit loss or does that go under functions? So, a very tight demarcation can't really be done. But this is the broad breakup that I have seen over the years. And hence this can be expected. Yeah. Yes, Kaushik, tell me. Okay, what should be the perfect strategy? What should be the perfect strategy for jumbled rearranged questions? That is para jumbles in VARC. Okay, so it would have been nice to know your name, but that's fine. Generally, I look at three parts to, and I have said this always in my solutions. I look at three parts. For me, the key is always the links to the statements. Now, how do I establish the links? One, I look at grammar. Now, within grammar also, for me, a key part of establishing the links or identifying what will start or end my passage, one is the use of articles, because very often the article the versus the article a and an help me identify whether a certain subject is being, when I say subject, I'm looking at it as like a subject predicate here, or a topic, either ways you consider, whether it has been introduced earlier or it is being now continued. So I look at articles, I look at pronouns, which are very important. Secondly, I look at paragraph structure. And of course, there will be different faculty who will have different methods. There'll be pure verbal faculty who might have far better methods. This is the approach that I use always. Now, what do I mean by parastructure and sentence structure? I try and figure out what is the passage trying to communicate. Is it trying to, and I have said this in my solutions as well, is the passage trying to create a theory, then explain it and give an example? Or is the passage trying to first give an example and then arrive at a theory? Is it giving me opinion one contrasted by opinion two? So try and identify the objective. If you have gone through the solutions that I give, generally I would say you would have seen that I write down all 5 statements and I give the purpose of each statement, saying that statement 1 does this, statement 2 does this. It might so happen that some of my understanding may not be perfect, but if I do that, it often helps me understand the whole sequence of statements better. So grammar, parastructure. Third would be the use of connectors, which would be conjunctions. Also, there are connectors which either take a statement forward or they take a contrast, which means I either look at a continuation. So for example, if I look at statements like furthermore, therefore, they are taking the existing statement, either trying to prove it or say this is the effect. If I look at statements like nevertheless or though, although, then they are kind of giving me a contrast. So look at all these statements to form links. Once I form links, I am more of a DILR person. So what I try and do, I try and visualize my para jumble as say a 4 or 5 seat linear arrangement. And then I ask myself that, okay, statement 3 has to be somewhere after 1. So statement 3 can't be here. So 3 can be somewhere here. Okay. And if 1 is, somewhere before 3, it has to be here. It can't be here. And accordingly, I try and fit them into this seating arrangement. I'm not saying do that in the exam. It's a technique that works for me. It may not work for everyone, but it definitely helps me figure out whether the certain statement will either start my passage or not. Okay, coming to Kaushik's question, should I practice or what should I practice in DILR? My DILR is average. So, Kaushik, the first thing that I would say is when you say your DILR is average, I said the same thing earlier in verbal as well, that the entire section is never average. The question types are average. I mean, you will be struggling with certain question types. And also, if you sit down to analyze the question types, you'll realize that your problem in each of these question types may be different. So for example, it may so happen that in a matrix arrangement or in a caselet, you are able to formulate the questions, but you get lost within the clues. Whereas in a Venn diagram or in a network diagram, you are not able to create the diagram at all. So, all of you may have seen Hera Fairy, and there is a very, very famous dialogue in that movie, where Paresh Rawal says, something like नाम घर या नौकरी तुम्हारा समस्या क्या है. It's a very, very profound statement. It has a lot of meaning to it. When you say my DILR is average or my question type is average, identify the problem. Don't just ask or tell yourself or your faculty that this is average. And I'm not, kind of criticizing you here, not at all. I'm trying to show you a direction that you need to figure out that for whatever question types you're struggling, ask yourself, why am I struggling here? In general, is it because I'm unable to formulate the structure? Is it because I can make the structure but I can't go forward, I get lost in clues? Is it because I make the structure, the clues, but I'm unable to answer the question? At what step are you stuck? Till you don't identify that, you will be only going around in circles. So Kaushik, you will need to do that. If you do that in the next couple of days, you at least identify it to some extent, then you might be able to arrive at some homework that you need to do for the next 4-5 days and improve on DILR. At the same time, if I have to put it in practical terms, whatever 5 or 7 question types you feel you are average at, make it a point that over the next maybe 6 days, you have practiced at least 3-4 question types or 3-4 sets within each of these, so that you don't feel completely lost when you go for the test. Yeah. Abhinav, how many questions do I have to attempt for a good percentile? Firstly, Abhinav, what is a good percentile is a very, very relative thing. I mentioned that right at the beginning that you'll need to you'll need to go to number of or percentage marks as a mapping of percentile. So just as an indicator, suppose you're targeting 98% percentile, then I know that I need anywhere between say 45 to 50% marks. Then you break this down into marks per section and then attempts. So this would be your benchmark. So I just gave that right at the beginning of the session where I gave you typical percentage targets for each percentile range. You could work backwards from there and then decide how many questions you want to attempt, because it will also depend on your individual sectional accuracy. Okay. Sir, is it wiser to revise the previous mocks or should we brush up all the formulae and basic concepts? Smriti, I would say it ideally should be a combination of the two, because it shouldn't happen that, and with so many formulae, it shouldn't happen that on the day of the exam, you get stuck with one formula and you are not very sure that, oh, was it n plus r minus 1 cr minus 1, or was it n minus 1 cr minus 1? Or one formula that since my student days I always used to get stuck was a into r raised to n minus 1 divided by r minus 1. Formula for sum of n terms of a GP, of course, when r is greater than 1. Now today I remember it, But when I was a student, I always used to get stuck here, and you'll not believe the silliest point where I used to get stuck was ये r जो -1 है वो इधर आता है या इधर आता है. You know, something as silly as this. Is it this or is it this? And in the exam, when you get paralyzed by fear or paralyzed with fear, you're really stuck that what exactly do I need to do here? Then in that scenario, I developed a method where I would take a simple GP 1, 2, 4, 8. I know their sum is 15. So I put the value in both the formulae and solve and see if I get my answer. So then I become sure. So here, Smriti, again, I would say if you feel you're damn good at formulae, then focus could be on revising mocks with 1 day given to the formulae and concepts. If you do have a tendency to forget them, like I have, then maybe I would keep aside 2 hours every day for concept revision and the rest of. So I would then divide my day into, let's say, if I want to study for 10 hours, then I would keep 2 hours for concepts, 2 plus 2, 4 hours for mock plus analysis. So that's 4 plus 2, 6. And I would keep anywhere, say, between 3 to 4 hours in parts for practice. This would be my strategy. Suppose somebody feels that, no, I don't really need to do this. I'm damn good at this. Then keep your 2 plus 2, 4 hours for mocks and 6 hours for practice. Somebody has forgotten formulae, add 1 hour here, subtract 1 hour here. So take, whatever is the total time available for you and divide it that way. Essentially, this becomes like a fixed cost, variable cost problem. You know that you'll need 4 hours here. Ye fixed hai. So whatever time you have beyond this, that you try and divide based on your, preparedness. Yeah, Smriti, I guess that should help work out for you. Okay. So I'll just see if I have, okay. So I don't see any fresh questions coming in. So I'll now go on to the last 2 points because I've covered most of the points on mocks and practice. One word of caution, as I said, please do not keep changing your strategy drastically in all the mocks that you take. One more thing, and I am saying this from my experience of student days, the day you feel that you are losing your confidence due to the mocks, stop taking mocks. That day could be today, that day could be Monday, it could be Wednesday. On any given day, if you feel that, oh God, my score has dipped so much, what will happen to me in CAT? Don't take mocks, focus on practice. Because there is no point or there is no benefit in going into the exam hall with a shattered confidence. That is what cricketers also do. If they feel that, oh, I'm not doing well in the nets, they'll take throwdowns or they'll simply practice throwing the ball if they are a bowler. They'll not play in a practice match. Everybody has their own approach. So you need to take the approach that works for you here. Yeah. Overall, 80% accuracy is good. Somesh, it is good, but please keep in mind that the top 1 percentile or top 2 percentile will anyways be getting an 80% accuracy at a bare minimum across sections. So if you figure out where you want to be, if you feel that no, I need to touch a 99, then you always have to try and get that 80 to 85. Now, does that happen uniformly? Not necessary. So if I'm average at verbal, I'll try and touch 80 in verbal. But if I'm damn good at content DI, then touch 90 there, no? Then why are you satisfied with 80 in that case? So whatever are your strongest sections, that has to be maximized. Whatever is your weakest section, that has to be optimized. Please do not say that has to be minimized. That would be silly. So you optimize your weak section, maximize your strong sections. Yep. Now coming to the last 2 points here, what should be your mindset and important documents? So here, I'll just share my hall ticket here. Is this visible, guys? Just a second. Yeah. Okay, the hall ticket is not visible, so I'll just read out some of the points. Fine, Shivang. I think rather than trying to change the screen settings again, wait, let me just a second. Okay, visible now. Okay, so why do I want to show you this? Not for my face or not for the details here, but keep these two, 3 points in mind. The first important point is this reporting time now and this gate closure time. When you consider this, please do not target this. 12:30 है 12:05 को पहुंच जाते, we'll run and rush. Why do you want to increase your blood pressure and try and reach at the last minute? Then you realize you've forgotten something, you need to keep stuff. Why do you want to do that? There are times, yes, when you reach at 11, and you might be bored for 1.5 hours, but that's okay. So try and target that if your exam is at 12:30, latest you're there by 11:30. Similar for the first slot and the third slot. So for the 8:30 guys, try and reach by 7:30. For the 4:30 guys, try and reach by 3:30. Latest, I'm saying. Absolutely latest. What is more important, especially for this year, and I'm sure all of you would have taken care of this. If you, I would want you to read point 6 very carefully, create a checklist for you, and ensure that all these things are done. So if you have, and that's also important not just for the cat, but also for your individual health. So please ensure that you have not just one mask, but maybe a couple extra with you in your bag. You get those surgical gloves, keep a box with you. That investment is not worth the, it's more than worth the cost. So please ensure that you have a list of all of these and carry all of these in the exam. Why am I saying this? There have been occasions earlier years as a faculty. I have gone to take tests and I didn't carry a pen with me. I forgot it. Then in the exam hall, you have to request two other people. You have to request the invigilator. Bhaiya pen milega kya? Why do you want to do that? I can afford to take an exam without a pen and I can still get damn good marks because I'll solve a lot of questions orally. But if you have worked hard for this, then a silly mistake like this would end up screwing up your whole attempt. So please be very, very careful here. I always recommend people make a checklist of all the points here. If you feel you are not good at it, please ask your parent or any other person to do this and cross verify it with you. And ensure that you have all of this ready at least 48 hours in advance. There is no point running around next Saturday trying to search for a Xerox somewhere or trying to search for somebody who will print out all this. So if you have this admit card, take a couple of copies, stick the pick, carry 2, 3 extra picks and go for the exam. Again, with respect to Google Maps here, these might sound like very small and silly points, but believe me, I have seen people really go wrong here. So, like I'll tell you an example. For those of you who live in Mumbai, you would know that in this area called Dadar, there are a lot of schools by the name of IES, Indian Education Society, and they have multiple schools bang opposite each other. So there'll be an English medium school, Marathi medium school, Hindi medium school, college, etc. So, or in Pune, if you go to MIT, MIT has at least 10 to 12 colleges within the same campus. If you reach bang on time and you've reached, say, MIT SOB, and the watchman says, भैया SOB नहीं है, आपको School of Management में जाना है. You realize MIT is such a huge campus, you have to walk for 1 kilometer. Imagine the kind of hypertension it will give you. Why do you want to do that? So keep all your documents, all your preparation in hand. If you are going to another city like I am doing, ideally the best thing to do is always reach 1 day in advance. Don't try to travel on the same day unless you have a 4:30 test. Then yes, you can afford. But for the 8:30 guys and 12:30 guys, I would say reach a day in advance. One other thing which I generally always tell people, please adjust your body clock accordingly. A lot of mentors do say this. The reason being, if you are, and especially for those people who are accustomed to waking up late or accustomed to late nights and have an 8:30 slot, if you don't make it a habit to wake up at say 5 or 5:30 over the next 1 week, then you are going to struggle to reach at 7:30 on that day. Similarly, your meals will have to be calibrated accordingly. Now, this might sound very silly. I say this every year, but if you are in one of the afternoon slots like mine, 12:30 or the 4:31, and you had a heavy meal or a heavy brunch, then very high chances you will feel bloated. It is a scientific fact that your brain will be more focused on digestion rather than trying to help you answer the questions. So have a light meal, be full. Don't be hungry or starved. That's also bad. Be full. I mean, be filled, not really full. Have a hearty meal. Eat fruits early in the morning. That's always better than eating very fried stuff on that day. Now, in these COVID times, please ensure that your throat, your nose, etc., are very, very safe over the next 7 days. Because you don't want a scenario where you're coughing on that day and some cranky security guard or invigilator there says you can't attempt the test. That would be the worst thing that could happen to you. So if you have even the remotest sign of a cough or a cold, please see a doctor right away. Please ensure that you are hale and hearty in the next 4 or 5 days and rest well. Maybe missing out on 1 day of studies will not be as bad as missing out on the test altogether. In a worst case scenario, I can afford to miss the test. You can't. Lastly, coming to one thing that I tell students always across the years is that no matter how important it is for you, it is an exam. It is not a matter of life and death. It does not define your self-worth. So you do not become, just a second, you do not become smarter or dumber based on your CAT percentile. If you get a great percentile, great. But if you get an average percentile, it does not mean that you are a bad student. It's just that you didn't do that well on the D day. So whatever happens on that day will define, of course, to some extent, the direction of your life. It may define that, but don't put so much pressure on yourself that on the day you are paralyzed by that pressure. We all are now graduates, postgraduates, people with work ex, and we've cleared all kinds of tests from childhood to our 10th standard, 12th standards, graduation, GRE, GMAT for some of you. You may have taken CAT earlier as well. So if we have the intelligence to take all these mocks, then you should trust yourself and back yourself that no, I am good enough to achieve a certain level for yourself that kuch bhi ho jaye, I need to cross 97 percentile. Top wop nahi karna hai, 97 minimum lana hai. How do I go there? And I'm good enough to go there. So set some kind of targets for yourself, a basic target, and move towards that. But don't let it paralyze you. One thing that I said right at the beginning, please do not compare your preparation with anybody else's preparation. For example, we have a student here, she
Shivam, who is very good at maths, he keeps sharing all kinds of excellent maths questions. Sometimes when I'm recording solutions and Shivam has sent 5 questions on our Telegram group, I see some of those questions and my confidence goes for a toss. I'm like, oh God, am I really that bad at maths? And then I tell myself, no, in an exam scenario, I do well. Right now, I'm preoccupied with other things. So if I compare myself with anybody else there, or if I tell myself that on the Telegram group, I should be the first to answer because I'm the faculty, then that would be silly. So don't really start saying that your friends are doing so well, I am doing slightly less. It may, I have seen people who were toppers in these mocks for institutes and got a 95 percentile, and people who used to get 93, 94 there end up getting a 99 plus. So it's absolutely what you do on that day. So keep all these points in mind. I'll just see if there are any questions that I've missed. If you have questions, please feel free to shoot. COVID test report is mandatory to take. No, the admit card does not say that. So no real point taking it. Why do you want to give them a data point to ask you something? And why do you want to risk yourself taking a COVID report? I would say don't really go for all that. Somesh, what colleges do we have to fill the form? Somesh, this is something which I'll need to check really because I need some data on that. So I'll check this and get back to you. Fine. So guys, any further questions? If not, then this will be the first time where I said that I'll finish it in 1.5 hours, and I would have actually finished. So that will be a record for me as well. But if you have questions, please feel free. Yes, Somesh, I'll do that on the Telegram group. Don't worry. Fine. Uh, Shivam, any formula or concept book by Test Funda? Shivam, unfortunately, and I'll apologize for that. When I did the live classes, I did intend to create a 100-page book. I did share one formula sheet with people as well. I couldn't really complete that. So right now, I don't really have that. But I'll see if I can arrange for something. I mean, I'll see if I have some source. But as a ready-made thing, I don't really have it right now. So if I do get, I'll definitely share it with you. Yeah, there was one question that I missed. What should be the average time that I need to spend on analyzing a mock? Rishav, more than need, when you start analyzing the mock, you'll realize that you'll end up spending at least a couple of hours because you'll need at least half an hour to 45 minutes to go through each section, see where you went wrong, analyze or go through the questions that were incorrect. So generally 2 to 3 hours is what people require. That's a bare minimum. Otherwise, sky is the limit. So yeah, I guess is Test Funda a part of IMS India? Firstly, this is not really relevant to our discussion here. We do have collaboration on certain aspects. So those aspects are more out of the realm of this discussion. So Test Funda and IMX mocks are completely different. They are created by different people, different teams altogether. If some of you do have access to SimCats and our iCats, I can challenge you to find any question that is common between the two. So I would not really, want to go into the greater details of that. But as a student, as far as you are concerned, SimCats and Test Funda iCats are two different sets of mocks. You can take both of them independently and solve them to the, best of your efforts. Fine. So guys, if there are no further questions, then let's call it a day. Wish all of you all the best. Please keep in mind that I am just a phone call away. Yes, I might be occupied, I might be delayed in answering you, but I'll try and give you time over the next 7 days whenever you require. So if you want, Feel free to ping me, call me whenever you want. I'll be available. Give it your best shot, do well, and wish you all the best, guys. Yeah, what are my contact details? So I'll just type my number and my email ID. You can either message or call me here, or this is my official email ID. So you can mail me here as well. So guys, I know it's not some kind of a farewell, but for most of you with whom I've interacted, Smriti, Shivang, over the period of time, I would say, it's been very nice, Neeral. You guys are a great bunch of students. I just wish you all the best. For all of you, do really well, give it your best shot. And even after CAT, if you need my help in whether it's form filling, GDPI guidance, whatever it is, feel free to get in touch. So thank you, wish you all the best, and see you again later. Good night.